With that, I'm very happy to introduce a longtime friend and colleague, Worley, the founder and CEO of StrangeWorks, for part 2 of his presentation on personal AI agents, transformational productivity. Thanks for joining us, Worley.
Thank you. I'm sorry the crab thing is the negative thing, given all the open claw and Nemo claw and all. You'd think that the crab thing would be like,
for this one, maybe crab is positive. Maybe people can use it positively here.
Yeah, there you go. I think I was like, wait, that's the negative. All right, well, great. Hey, everybody, it's great to be back, of course, with my friends from Google. And there's a lot to cover today. But the one thing we're going to do that we promised was a much more extended Q&A session. So I'm going to jump right into it so we can save as much time for that as possible. Please do start putting your questions in as Jay had instructed. And today, this is a part 2. And so for those of you who were here last time, and we'll make sure that it's linked out. We made a link to all the resources last time that we talked about. We'll do something similar this time on a Purcell website. And as you know, the presentation was all made by AI itself. No different today. So 3 weeks. It hasn't been that long since we talked. And wow, as a lot of stuff happened. So, you know, what's happened? What's happened in the last 3 weeks? Well, you know, when we left off, we were like, look, the action gap is closed. We've got, you know, some frameworks that are apt. We've got protocols, the MCP stuff, the A2A stuff was being talked about, now real. And then we talked about the surfaces, like all the different ways you could touch it. So you can use something in a browser, you could use it in a terminal, or you can use desktop or voice. Of course, I'm a huge fan of the voice stuff. And that was all interesting. Got a lot of interesting questions on LinkedIn after as well. I haven't gotten all of those, I apologize. But today, we're going to go over, and this is what shocks me about the world we live in, what's new in 3 weeks? Like Jay said, you could probably do one of these every week. Then we're going to get a little bit beyond the hype stuff, and we're going to focus on some deep dives and a couple of HPC topics specifically and things I think you'll find interesting. And then,
Worley,
yes.
Somebody asked if you could move your picture-in-picture part off the screen.
Oh,
it's not
sure.
blocking anything right now, but
none. I'll just close it. Boom. There we go. No problem. And then we'll go over the landscape, and then we'll do the, you know, kind of some, how you can do some rapid onboarding, because that was one of the questions that came out last time. And then we're going to do a Q&A about anything and everything you want to do. I can't guarantee I know absolutely everything, but we'll probably be able to do pretty well. So what's new? Again, 3 weeks, and then all of a sudden, Google Cloud Next 26 at a new tempo, along with a bunch of other things. At Google Cloud, there were hundreds of announcements and updates. They said 75% of the Google Cloud customers are on AI, with 150 orgs running the new A2A in production, and that they were clocking 16 billion tokens a minute via the API. That's shocking. And of course, Thomas came out and said other vendors are handing you the pieces, not the platform. It's part of Google's big play. As you know, in our last talk, we said OpenAI kind of wants to build that one super big app, right? And Claude is kind of doing the local first thing. Google is very focused on integration, and they have some huge advantages. They've already been indexing the web. They've already settled the issues with book publishers, you know, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. So this is not a surprise that they're seeing such a big uptake, and it's so easy to get started with it because I use Gmail and Google Workspace for all my stuff. And so, oh, look, there's Gemini. It just starts appearing and new functions. So it was really big. But the biggest part for us, and where we're going in a little different direction than last time, is last time we talked about personal agents. And this time we're talking a little bit more on enterprise and actually doing some real work with it. So Vertex AI got rebranded. It's Agent Space and Absorb. There's one stack now. You've got 6 components: Agent Studio, that's low code natural language builder, right? You've got the ADK 1.0, which is graph-based sub-agent networks. You've got the agent runtime. You've got the agent sandbox, which is a little hardened environment. And then you've got the memory bank, which is probably the most interesting point to me in the agent marketplace. So the fact that the agent marketplace has, you know, funding and it's got partners and everything, this is one of the things I haven't seen the other major providers do yet. They've done some things, but I think Google's going to have a pretty good success with it. And of course, today, right after our talk, immediately following it, will be Google's next set of announcements. And I hear in the rumor mill that there's going to be a couple of updates to some of these things and some really exciting new stuff as well. So when you talk about protocols, those are probably two of the biggest things they did, right? It's kind of like that interop layer finally meets like a real world we can use it. And the thing that I was excited about the A2A out of all of the points is that the Linux Foundation is governing it through their org. Get a long history with them. I've worked with them a lot. I think that's really awesome. I like their signed agent cards. I like that it's in production with all these people. But I think one of the things that's missing in that area is the community and the governance and building it all together. So that and the MCP, agent tools and data, of course, we talked about those last times, but Google's got Maps and BigQuery and GCE and GKE live, Apogee as an API, which is Agent Tool Bridge, I think is fantastic. And then, of course, there's the biggest thing, which is that model armor for prompt injection defense. Prompt injection, still a problem. I found someone who did something in a new way, which is they hid a prompt in an image and sent it to one of our friends in our Closton group here in Austin, and were able to mess up their machine. So really good to see that work being done. Now, when it gets to browser and computer use, two things came out that I was really excited about in these, and that one was Project Mariner. So that's DeepMind's web agent. It's a 10 concurrent task on cloud VMs. It is really interesting because this is where we're talking about, and we left off on with this last time, is this is where things are headed. I want to shop for something. I want to fill out a form to apply to become a member of something, whatever, where you can automate a lot of that. Now, I tested these and there are still issues because if it doesn't know what to fill in the form, or it doesn't have the information about you, if you haven't given it access, obviously it can't do it. But if you have your device set up and you have it done, it's super cool. And hopefully, they've got Mariner Studio coming out. They've got the cross-device sync, which is going to be really valuable. If my phone and my laptop can be filling out forms and doing shopping, I can just assign them things agentically, like, please go buy cat litter on Amazon. Please go do this, please do that. It's an amazing productivity thing. Where it gets really interesting to me is in the automation of things like customer support or return tickets or things that are, very, very highly time-intensive tasks where you've got a bunch of people who are working and replying to emails and interacting and stuff. You could tie all that together and have it doing a lot of processing. In the wider field, computer use shipped in general. We talked about this a little bit. I think we showed an example of cleaning up the desktop or whatever last time. But of course, OpenAI's Codex has background computer use on macOS. Codex is now in the ChatGPT mobile app, which is really weird. I don't understand why they don't just have a mobile app for that. But I mean, I guess I do, because they've got so many copies of that mobile app. They'd have to start from scratch, and it probably wouldn't have as good of adoption. The Perplexity Comet is pretty neat. There's also other browsers from most of these guys. And then there was a Ninth Circuit ruling on agent-based access, which we can dig into a little later. So that's kind of, all of that is just Google and a little bit of other stuff. In addition to that, May 1st, you had the Agent 365 GA, which is a cross-platform agent control plane that discovers AWS Bedrock and Gemini agents and the shadow AI detection. Anthropic on May 5th introduced Claude for financial services. So 10 ready-to-run agent templates for Excel and PowerPoint, Word, and Outlook to do everything from the analysis of investment to earnings reviews, things of that nature. Also on the 5th, IBM, who has been not too vocal in this whole area, introduced Watson X Orchestrate, which is their multi-agent orchestration. It's pretty interesting. It was part of, I think, 2026 keynote. On the 6th of May, Anthropic had the Dreaming Plus multi-agent announcement. Basically, agents can review past sessions and self-improve. Already in production at Netflix, apparently being used pretty heavily. And then on the 12th, Microsoft had their M-Dash, which is 100 plus agents orchestrated to find 16 new Windows vulnerabilities. That was really interesting. As you've probably read, everybody's been talking about Claude Mythos and, oh, the fear, it discovered all these security holes and all, and it's too dangerous. Happy to talk about this in more detail in the Q&A, but the short story is these large AI companies don't want regulation because they're great guys. They want regulation because if they can only give it to the government and then they can use it, then they're like the company of all companies, right? Like I wouldn't trust any of them as far as get home on that. And so when you read about Mythos and all these vulnerabilities, what actually happened is it found a lot of things that weren't even useful or wouldn't even really be exploited. Most of the ones that were found that were good were actually done by humans using it as a research tool. So there's a little bit extra hype around that security stuff, which Microsoft's trying to take advantage of. I don't blame them. Then on 18th, of course, the Vera CPU shipped from NVIDIA, which is the first really agentic AI CPUs delivered to Anthropic and OpenAI and SpaceX and OCI. So that's the highlights of things I paid attention to in a world where I'm getting 10, 15, 20 updates a day. But those are ones that I think are important. So as I said, there's a lot of hype. Moving beyond that hype, let's talk about agents in the lab and the HPCQ, right? So there's 4 kind of things that I want you to pay attention to here. First is this hypothesis to experiment loop, right? There's a lot. Datametrics Luma agent that does it. There's a new company that just does it in biotech. There's a new company that just does it for robotic automation. We've probably all read about things like Google Co-Scientist. So this is a really, really big and expanding area. And so this is where we take the role of a researcher and we automate it in a big way. Everybody talks about taking developer and making him a 10x developer or 100x developer. I'm a big fan of doing that with researchers for, curing diseases and fixing energy crisis and all of these things. So this is super big. And again, there's a dozen of these things out there right now. StrangeWorks, our company, even has one called Aura that does something similar. And it's like, this is going to be a very, very popular thing in the immediate future. The other thing is multi-agent orchestration. I think, we talked last time about paperclip and how you could set up a CEO. The CEO could hire a developer and a marketing personnel, and all those people it was hiring were sub-agents that could then go give the task. That's come a long way in the last 3 weeks on every platform, OpenAI, Gemini, and Anthropic. This is really useful. Anthropic did this whole lead plus specialist patterns. It's similar to what we talked about with paperclip. For me, I actually like shooting the agents across the different ones. So as we know, I subscribe to all of them. So I will have, Gemini as my deep research agent and several other tasks. I'll have Claude as my planning and documentation. And then I'll have Codex do the coding on projects. The thing that's problem is that when I do it across those systems, I don't have the shared file system and persistent events and everything that Anthropic is built in and that others are building in. Again, remember last time we compared where these feature sets were, nothing has changed. Somebody's going to do something, somebody else will have their version of it in no time. It's going to start moving, unfortunately, from what we've seen for the last 3 weeks, even faster than what we talked about last time. Now, the self-improving agents, the Anthropic Dreaming, this is the thing I like the best out of all the things that have come out lately. And that's because I take past sessions, right? And I'm able to review them on a scheduled review. So for example, let's say that I build an agent to do something with StrangeWorks. Maybe it's triaging my email or following, bug tracking or something like that. I can set it up to review those past sessions from the day before, the day before that, the day before that, and have that contextually as it looks into doing it the next time. So this is really useful. I'm sure we've all run into persistent memory is the Achilles heel of all of this. It's very hard. And all of these things, the multi-agent orchestration, self-improving agent, they're band-aids still, in my opinion. Like none of it really works great. I'm sure any of you using it have used it for something and then ask it for something else. And after the context window is compacted, it said, oh, I don't have any information on that. You're like, you literally just did that. So, those are things that definitely still need improvements. And then the last thing is the M- thing wasn't the only thing. You saw the Anthropic Mythos hype. You saw what was going on with the DARPA's AI challenge. Microsoft's M- fell onto that. Autonomous security research is very exciting to me as a space. However, all of the fears that we have about like quantum computing breaking encryption or all these guys did this. I think this is probably the biggest concern I have when it comes to the security of your personal information and banking and all of that, is a combination of people using 11 labs to fake my voice and call Jay and say, hey Jay, I'm I'm in Guatemala and I got robbed and $8,000 or whatever the case is. And you're seeing those spams get currently improved, now matched with and paired with the ability to go look at vulnerabilities, because these autonomous security research bots aren't just looking at, oh, you've got something misconfigured in your cloud or whatever. They're also looking at, there's one that looks at LinkedIn and everything, and looks at Glassdoor for all of the complaints about a company, and then tries to find that person on LinkedIn and tries to social engineer through a back door. So that's really interesting. But this one up here, the hypothesis and experiment loop, absolutely the one that I think drives the most change, positive change in the world. This one down here, the autonomous security research, one I worry about a little bit. So what does that mean in our landscape of where we're at? So we did a side-by-side of all of these other tools last time. So if we look at these, Gemini Enterprise, whole agent platform, just like Thomas said, they're delivering a platform, not just pieces. It's full stack, chip to inbox, A2A native, which is a big thing, with Linux Foundation behind A2A. I think that's going to be the way that we have agents talk to each other. Everybody, I could say watch out for a lock into GCP for full value. I use all the tools, but have been really happy with Google tools. So, I don't really worry about that too much. Under that, you've got Claude and CoWork. It's really great for knowledge work. It's really great for finance and code. The skills of dreaming, the manage agents, and the M365 add-ins are all super cool. But they tighten their personal plan limits on the 14th of May. And it's going to get worse. And we talked about that last time, how we're going to go from $200 a month to $2,000 a month to $20,000 a month. Because if you look at it, Anthropic has to make $1 trillion a year in recurring revenue in the next 3 years, I think it is, for them to stay in business. So, and OpenAI has $1.6 trillion in financial commitments on not anywhere near that in revenue. So that you do want to make sure when you're using these agents, especially when we're talking about not personal agents, but using them at work, using them at the enterprise, you want to make sure that you come up with a way to back up all the stuff you're doing in case that subscription goes up 10x and you decide to drop it and you want to use a different one. The way I do that is for everything my agent does, it writes it into one of several markdown files. And so I have a whole collection of markdown files, and each one of these agents that's doing things is putting what they're doing in the markdown file. And then one markdown file at the end of the day is just the whole conversations we've had. And that way, my worst case is, or if I want to kick up a different technology, I can be like, go look at all of this. Now you have context, and now we can continue to work. But this will be getting to a really interesting point very, very soon as you look at, the usage of the data centers, the build schedules for them, all of that. As resource gets constrained, those prices are going to jack up pretty high. And Anthropic had already done this with enterprise. Now they've done it with personal. I hear the personal is going to go up again. As far as OpenAI and Codex, I love Codex for coding. It's probably my favorite, and for computer use and kind of developer flow. The strengths are I can kick off tasks now on my laptop on mobile. I don't even need an OpenClaw or anything. It's got SSH. It's got all the right hooks. It's got a ton of IDE CLI surface for me to play with. I mainly use it from the app now. I used to only use it from the CLI, but it's really, really sweet. What you might want to watch out for is, computer use is blocked in a bunch of countries. So if you're working, so for example, StrangeWorks has employees in Scotland and in the UK and in Germany. Some of those employees, I'm like, oh, we built this tool. This is how you can have it do on your computer to line up all these files and keep you in sync. Our guys, Stuart in Glasgow and James in London, they can't use that. So, because there are definitely a lot of, you're going to start getting into where regulation starts to come into AI pretty heavy along that line. The Microsoft Agent 365, it is standard Microsoft, very enterprise IT. It does work on GCP and AWS, but it's like, I don't know that you get a lot of value of it if you're not solely on Microsoft's platform. Whereas with the others, OpenAI and Claude and Gemini, I can get value of them. Doesn't matter if I'm on an Android phone or iPhone or Mac laptop or my Linux box or whatever, I can access and all those tools are useful. And then the other thing is we talked about OpenClaw and NemoClaw. These are great. OpenClaw it can be hard to keep it stable. NemoClaw is kind of the hardened version that NVIDIA has done. It's very cool because it's open source. It's got local memory, which is awesome. It's got multi-channel. Two big things is that persistent memory, but more importantly, you're the security perimeter. So when you first saw OpenClaw come out, you saw a ton of people say, you know what, this isn't secure. It's a giant security issue. It's whatever. I don't believe that. I believe a bunch of people installed it who didn't understand what they're installing, didn't know what they're doing. But I liken it to back in the early 90s when Apache web server was taking off and everybody was installing a web server and there were all these security holes because they're like, sure, open all those ports and do all this. Yeah, sounds good. So, do be aware when you're using those of what you're doing. And that doesn't just go for OpenClaw and NemoClaw. That goes for Claude and OpenAI, especially when you're giving it access to your actual physical machine. So try to get everybody started last week. A few of you did. There's one of you I will call out during the Q&A here in a minute. So I'm going to look it up on my phone. But I'm going to call him out right now, actually. Mentions. And that is Arthur Deponian. I don't know if he's here, but I loved, or rather Charles Downley. Arthur sent it to me. Charles saw the thing last week. He went and created his own program. It's up on LinkedIn, his details. And he went through a pretty awesome post about his journey in doing that. And I would encourage you guys to maybe check that out. I'll get Jay a link for that. But here's what I would suggest. After hearing the feedback from last time, I'd say pick one workflow. Just pick one thing that you do every day. Maybe that you do every week if you want to be a little cautious. Maybe it's the triaging of the email, maybe it's a report. There's a ton of stuff. Again, I use this for all of it, and I'm happy to share with you everything that I'm doing. But one thing that came through last time was a bunch of people hit me up on LinkedIn, and they weren't sure about where they should start or what they should do. I'd say triage your inbox. Gemini will do it, Claude will do it, OpenAI will do it. Whichever one you have will be fine. They'll be great. Don't do it with Grok. We haven't mentioned Grok. We haven't mentioned Grok because I don't think it's anywhere near ready for prime time. In fact, the colossal data center just got leased out, almost 100% of it to Anthropic because they obviously haven't been using it to train. And I used Grok as a test as a favor to a friend that works on the XAI team. And it was disastrous. I had 10 emails in my inbox. It triaged it and said there were 30 important emails. And one was from alerts at bank.com, which obviously is not a real thing, and a whole bunch of other stuff. So, definitely not quite ready. Great if you want to make a waifu or some images, but not really useful for work or coding. Although they did release their new code this week in beta. So, go play with it if you want. I haven't had a chance yet. So once you pick that workflow, match the surface to work, right? I love Codex and Claude for coding. I love Claude and actually Gemini for the knowledge work, and then Gemini Enterprise. If you're doing something at a business and you're a small and medium business or an enterprise, it's gonna be hard to beat Gemini. That's not an advertisement for Google because I don't have anything to do with them, but they invite me to talk, and I love this community so much. But they've really done an excellent job on the stuff, and I use a lot of that myself. Number 3 is wire one MCP server, right? Calendars, drives, GitHub, Slack. Start with a system that holds the context for that workflow. So if you're coding, log it in. So for example, we talked last time about websites. We had Codex to putting stuff into GitHub, which was tied to Vercel, right? And that was a really nice, smooth workflow because we write the code, it gets checked into GitHub, Vercel sees it and posts it on our staging server automatically, right? We can then have, Codex go and check the site, make sure there's no, does it look the line, does it look this, that, and then iterate until it gets to a point where we like it, at which point we can then say, hey, do you want to ship this to production? So the coding AI, GitHub Vercel is a really easy workflow to get going, and it's cheap. GitHub's like $4 a month, Vercel's like 10. It's super easy, and we can show a demo of that or two as well. And then set guardrails before your scope, right? Think of the security stuff before you execute anything. Like, what am I wanting to do? How sensitive is the information? For example, my personal email, I don't mind it triaging. My StrangeWorks email, I can't have it triage because we have a lot of government customers and do a lot of things like that. And I can't have it look at those because technically I'm taking all that data and I'm shipping it into an LLM that's acquiring it. It violates NDAs, it violates a whole bunch of stuff. So just be cautious about like, this is what I want to do. This is what it could affect. This is the information it will have and that it can affect. And these are the possible consequences. Remember, one of the differences between AGI and what we have now, which is really amazing automation, is that while we understand a little bit of context now and we need improvements, these things don't understand consequence, right? Which will be one of the big moves as far as intelligence goes. And then measure and expand. So last time we talked about how to decide how much to invest in your spending in AI. This time, let's talk about how you figure it out. So I know it sucks, but there's plenty of apps and stuff where you get a stopwatch. Like, hey, I'm going to be doing my email in the morning. Hit a stopwatch, test it out. Or if you're writing something and work on that. And then when you've got those times and you've picked your thing, go see how much you actually were able to achieve by that, right? And get that agent really, really working well before you go and add others. One of the things it's so tempting to do that almost everybody does, and I did at first too, is all of a sudden I got 50 agents running on a whole bunch of stuff. I've got some big token bill and I haven't really achieved anything, but it was really cool. So definitely just start small. Everybody that messaged me on LinkedIn after last talk, just start with something that you spend a lot of your time on. I talked at an Austin Forum event a couple weeks ago, I think it was, and I was telling people, this is the value of these things, right? This isn't about, yeah, you can go make money and okay, software's changing and all this stuff. The value to you personally is you can make more money. You can get another job that's higher paying. You can create new ideas. You can do all this. You can't manufacture time. And so my use of AI is solely focused on how do I eliminate as much time out of the work schedule and all the other tasks I have at nonprofits or whatever, and into I have that free time in my life. So definitely start with that. Now, that leads us pretty close. It's at 30, 40 minutes, 35 minutes, to our extended Q&A, which can be anything, and we can do demos as well. And so, I would like to turn it over to the audience, and let me pull up the Q&A thing here. All right, that's the introductions. Questions. There we go. There's only 2 questions, guys. Come on.
All right. So I'm going to remind everybody, usually people submit questions about now because the presentations are a little longer, but we're going to have more Q&A today. So everybody start getting your questions into the Q&A feature. We have a couple in there now, but I'm going to start with one to allow people to get some questions in there, and then we'll go with the ones that are in Q&A. My question, very simply, I loved your point 4 a couple of slides ago about set guardrails first, then scope. Can you describe that a little bit more, and how effective is it? For example, if you set scope and it can hallucinate, can it still not interpret things correctly when you set guardrails? Like, do not delete anything from this inbox, but do give me a report on what's important in it. So scope's no guarantee, right?
So scope's no guarantee. You need more than that. So for my personal setup, I use Google Workspace. When I set up my agents, like I have an agent Gloopy that has its own LinkedIn, its own bank account, all those things. When I set that up as an employee in Google Workspace. Why? Because then, just like a new employee, just like an intern or whatever, I can set hard limits on everything to where it can't, even if it wanted to, delete some information or access this thing or whatever. Now, that's very granular, and I'm not going to lie, it took me 2.5 hours to set that up for Gloopy. But guess what? Now I can let Gloopy pretty much run rampant on everything because there's no damage he could do that is either that's irrecoverable or some insurmountable problem it could create for me. And so, yeah, you do need more than scope. Scoping it is just like thinking about it like, okay, I wanted to access my email. Well, I've got a personal email and a work email. All right, well, probably don't want to do the work email without their permission, so I'm going to focus on personal. Do you want it to, I'll give you a classic example of how not to set a scope. I got a friend, buys a lot of stuff his wife doesn't know about, and he probably shouldn't. And he had it sum up the emails and send a text to his wife and all with like, just so you know, these are the important things, and family email box. And he said, oh, he expanded it. And so it's family email box, it's his email box, and added hers. And his email box was like, dude spent 12 grand on something, and his wife got it in the summary in the text report. So it's not just scoping for security, it's scoping for problems. And you don't want people to think that, you know, look, it's no different than handling a person. Think of your agent as just a digital version of a person. Trust them, but verify, you know, build the trust over time, give them limits today. If you do that, it's going to be so much easier for you to manage this stuff. Like I said, Gloopy 2.5 hours probably to go through all the Google stuff, but then I knew, and I had everything, and I had all these permissions. The other thing is I gave Gloopy his own email box. So what's really cool is he has full control over that. So if I get an email in my inbox and I want Gloopy to do something, I just forward it to Gloopy with the instructions. In his email box and his thing, he can do all manners of things, but he can't like reply to my contacts as me or do certain things. So setting those limits is pretty hard. And by the way, somebody, one of the first questions we did get from Atul was where's the link? And I'll post that link right now into the chat.
We also have some more questions now in the Q&A feature. Atul Kumar asked about that link, so you're going to post that.
Yep, it's posted.
Yeah, it looks like Brady Dibble has a couple of questions in there.
I'm checking them out right now. Yeah. So Brady said, what are you seeing in regards to the best practices for MCP design? I've started leaving the MCP as a thin shim, which triggers deterministic workflows as much as possible. You know, I don't know that you're a Luddite for that. I think MCP changes before the end of summer. I have to be very careful about what I say and don't say there. But I think MCP changes. So I would not look at what you're doing as a Luddite. I think it's a fine way to do it. I think there's a lot of other ways to do it, but I think I've already seen some things in the past 2 weeks that are going to take us into things working better. I mean, these things, basically somebody does something, 100 people copy it, then 3 people improve it, then they do it. It's moving so rapidly. I wouldn't get caught up on that. You also asked, what's your take on keeping the worker agent stateless and moving all state to the orchestrator? Effectively, every task becomes a Ralph loop with fresh content, but improved context each time. That's not a bad idea. I haven't done that myself. I don't have a problem with context because I set up my server, my agents to take tasks and break them down. And so I take something that's done and I break it down across these different systems and across the different agents. Like I said, Google for research, Claude for programming. Because of that, something that was a giant task where I was going to get compacted, and the tasks usually aren't that long, even writing an application. And then I put breaks in there as well so that they're always, you know, kind of like, okay, I like to think of it like, I mean, developers hate unit test, but you know, I kind of like think of it like entering unit test in there so that my agent is like, okay, I've worked on this for an hour. Let me make sure I document and bookmark where I'm at, and then I'll keep working, you know, and then kind of, there's ways to overcome those context windows. We got another one here. What's your view on memory systems for agents? Oh God, I knew this one would come up. It came up last time. Memory systems for agents, markup files, wiki, graph, rag. What do I use? All right. So it depends on what I'm working with. If I'm working with OpenClaw, I use Gemini because there is a link to use your Gemini Flash API key and use Gemini to extend the memory. I use a lot of Markdown files. I'm a big fan of Markdown files because they're on my machine. My machine is automatically backed up and archived, and I have had 100 agents build and crash and have had stuff ruined, and I've never not been able to just recover instantly. I use a Mac, so I have those files. I have an external hard drive hooked to the machine. It has split into a couple terabytes here and a few terabytes there. The bigger section is for work files. The other section is for Apple's Time Machine. So you can literally, I have my Time Machine running like very, very often. I would not suggest doing that. But basically, effectively, I've got like a 5 or 10 minute snapshot window now where I can just click and go back and be like, now the machine's reset to where it was before I had the problem, which has been super, super interesting. I know a lot of people have been asking about the Hermes agent. I installed it. It was a little lackluster for me. I didn't have a problem with it. I I was kind of excited about it because I've been a little bit, OpenClaw's, changes and everything breaks, and I need something stable if I'm doing all this work. I'm not super happy with any of them right now. In the hurry to, it's standard software development, in the hurry to get features out and say, we've got those 10 features too, there's not a lot of testing and Q&A, stuff going on. And how does this feature work and why? And, no regression testing for sure. I mean, I would assume that the most of the people that install OpenClaw update, it breaks their OpenClaw. I am working on one personally now, which I can't talk about, but it's going to be very different and very tricky. It's probably going to get me in a lot of trouble, but I've started to build my own because of that. And again, it's not that OpenClaw is not great. It's fantastic. Peter's a friend. I'm on the maintainer list. They're amazing. And the NemoClaw stuff and everything that they're doing, it's all fine, but you're going to start seeing all of those harnesses and things built into everything Anthropic does, everything Google does, everything. They're all going to have one. And so, one of the jokes about Clawston that Justin Ewens and I were joking about early on was, well, this is the OpenClaw meetup, but like, how long is it going to last? Do we have a year before OpenClaw is just like, everybody's built all the stuff in or what? So that's going to happen.
I am hoping you will transition that Clawston meetup to a more, agentic Austin meetup.
We will. That'll happen. Brady also asked, how do we avoid dreaming eventually poisoning the underlying knowledge base over time? Anything an agent cannot verify can be reinforced incorrectly if there's no agent. Yep. The volume of information is too much. Yeah, that's tough. When you talk about these hallucinations, I haven't seen a lot of hallucinations, but that's primarily because of my workflow. I do research on every single thing I'm going to do with an agent in Google. It gives me citations for each one of those. I take that into Claude. Claude verifies the citations and it basically goes and checks the websites and double checks it all. And then it runs it against the index of like places like, because, anybody can build a website and be like, well, this is more trusted than that. It gives them a weight, scoring. And then that goes into the planning. And so because of that, I've only had one hallucination problem in the last year, and that has been when I used Grok to do that email thing and it made up all these crazy emails. I'm happy if you hit me up on LinkedIn or whatever to go into more details on that. I haven't had that problem. I'm an old school software developer, garbage in, garbage out. And so the first step in my workflow is, how do I get and define the right information about the thing I'm trying to do that's validated before I put it in there, right? I mean, I know a lot of people are using the AI to find that information. That's where I think you get into danger. If you start the first process with trusted, validated information and go through, I don't think you'll see as much hallucinations. All right, maybe I'll
see if we got some more questions in there. You shared the link.
Yes, Brady, you have to read.
Brady has asked a few.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And so guys, everybody wanted so many questions last time. Yeah, I've seen agent memory, Aaron, and there's a lot of those things that are interesting.
So Worley, I'm going to ask you a question. You said you primarily use it to save time, and I totally agree with that. It's the one thing that none of us can make more of. So if we can shorten the toil that we waste time on, that gives us back time. What are your top 3 things you're currently using agents for that are saving you time? Not just doing something else that you couldn't have done before, perhaps, but are saving you time in your productivity.
Number one thing right now is I don't attend meetings. I send my agent to meetings. It takes the Zoom or Google Meets call or whatever. It takes it, it summarizes it. It gives me every time my name was mentioned, if a question was asked. More importantly, I've now got it set up to where it's saying, this is where the group couldn't make a decision. And it tells me, like, this person said this and this person said that and that person said that. It sounds like they're not at a decision, and the decision might need to be this or that. That's number one, is not attending meetings. Hands, I know a lot of people will have.
All right, let's move on to number 2, because I don't know if that's practical for all the rest of us that don't own our own company.
Great. Number 2 is in emails. I get so many, when you start a company, your email gets put on all these lists, and then there's always the people that are trying to sell you 10 leads, or, you know, and you get, and so, you know, sure, I've got the Google filters to get rid of a lot of that. There's still a million things to get through, but also quantum computing is very interesting right now. In the last 6 months, 8 months, the uptick in just random emails from private equity firms or whoever, and I don't know which one of those is important or which one isn't. So don't just triage your mail. Have it look at your mail. Have it say, if anything looks like it could be an investment opportunity or an exit opportunity or a partnership or whatever, you know, I give it rules. Again, I do the work up front. Then it takes that and it goes and researches it using Google Gemini and creates a Google Doc. And then I get those Google Docs. And what I was doing is I was reading those Google Docs instead of emails in the morning. So it'd be a short Google Doc and it would say, you know, we heard from all these people, blah, blah, blah. Okay, great. I know what's in my inbox. Nothing's critical or something's critical. And it would say opportunities, like here's one. And so this guy's 200 mails down in my inbox, but I'm going to respond to that first because, you know, it saw that he said he wanted to invest, and it went and checked out his website and did some basic diligence, and it's like, sounds like this is real, you should do this. So that's another way. The third way is management of all my files and machines. I now have the agents managing everything on Google Drive and my hard drive. In fact, right. I've moved my hard drive primarily, like if we look at my desktop right now, and I've always had a pretty clean desktop. I have some things I'm working on today, right? I'm updating the Quantum Computing for Dummies book and returning a package to Amazon or whatever, but there are no files. And if I go into documents, this is my agent SoFon on my local computer. I've got the Zoom folder and then the Codex folder they made. I have no files on here. Like if I just lost the machine or whatever, like it'd be easy to remote wipe and do nothing. And all of that now at this point has been put in Google Drive because Gemini is so good at managing them. And then I've got Codex and Claude that can both integrate with that and upload them all, and then I can have them managed. It's fantastic. And those are probably the top 3 ways.
Yeah, I'm nervous about the file management one, but totally get you on the email one.
But why? But why? Because like, okay, if you're not backing your computer up properly, I would totally worry about it. But if you're practicing good like hygiene on your data anyway, it should be a very, very small and rare chance and rare event that you would like, oh, I lost a file.
All right. Well, Worley, it looks like we have answered all the questions that were in the chat. So I am going to, in the Q&A feature. So I'm going to move to the final slides.